Hi, my name is Rocco. Today I'm going to show you how I roast with a Boca Boca 250 without using a thermometer. What happened was it comes with a very small thermometer and it fits in the front and this rotates and it's very hard to read. And not only that, my thermometer lasted about 3 roasts. So I had to come up with a different way if I wanted to get some kind of a consistent roast. I had to figure out what else I was going to do. I like the roaster. The roaster works great. I didn't want to change the roaster. I didn't want to get rid of it. I just wanted to be able to use it without a thermometer. So that's what I'm going to show you today. And that is, you need a timer. I use my phone. I start the stopwatch and I follow that. And that's very important at finding out what stage your roast is in, and then color. The beans are, they get to be a certain color. They darken as they go through the stages. So those are going to be the things that I'm going to do. I want to say for the record, I am not a professional coffee roaster. This is how I do it. This is how I've discovered works for me on this particular machine, and it may not work for you. So if you're interested in how I decided upon this Boca 250, I'd love to share that with you. I did a lot of research, and for a home roaster, for the price, this is a nice little roaster, other than a couple of flaws. Basically, the biggest flaw is the thermometer. The other thing is, today I'm going to be roasting the Sumatra bean. All the beans are different. They have different amount of chaff that falls out into the cooling system. They roast differently. Decaf is already dark because of the process they use in decaffeination. So your bean is already darker than in a normal Sumatra bean. So now that comes into play when you're using your color for determining when you're done. Time is the important thing. How much time you got involved and how much smoke is coming off of here is a real important thing in finding out where you're at in your roast. And I have a lot of notes on each roast I did. And the more times you roast that particular roast, the more things you have to look at as to how many times you've roasted, what it took you to get to where you're at, what you like the best. And like I say, the more you do it, the more records you have. You can get a pretty consistent roast. I usually do 3 roasts at a time for a certain bean. And then I take the percentage of the moisture loss, and I'll show you how I do that later. Because the moisture loss determines on how dark your roast is. I do 3 of them. I take the average, and it's usually pretty much where I want it to be. So then what I do is I take that and mix them all together, and that's my roast. The other thing is, if you have a Boca 250 at home and your thermometer is working fine, let me know. Or if you've used it and it broke and you needed a thermometer and you found one, let me know. I'd love to get one. I tried. You can't believe how much I tried to get a thermometer. When I couldn't, then I had to go to phase 2. The other thing, too, is you might have the bigger one. You might have the Boca Boca 500. That has a bigger thermometer, and the tube rotates slower, so you're able to see the temperature a lot easier. Let me know how that works. All right, let's get started. You'll notice I'm setting the machine up underneath the fan on my stove. A lot of machines, you have to go outside. They create so much smoke. Not this one. And it will smoke. What's going to happen is the darker roast you do, and I like the dark roast, the darker you make them, the more it's going to smoke. So setting it up underneath the fan is great. You don't have to put the fan on right away. You can put the fan on a little bit later once you start seeing smoke. All right, now we select what kind of beans we want. And, I mentioned before, we're going to be using the Sumatra bean. I get 90% of my beans from a company on the internet called Sweet Maria's. They're a nice little company. They support the small bean farmer, and they have a lot of cool stuff you can buy. They have charts. They have different color charts, which are really important. Since we're using color, and until you determine what works best for you, you're going to have to go by visual color. Once you find out what works best, you'll have how much time it took you to get to the first crack, the second crack. All right, now we're going to weigh the beans. If you look at the owner's manual from the Boca Boca, they tell you that you can roast 250 beans at one time. I found that doesn't work well at all. I found that 225 grams of beans works great. What I notice is when you drop your beans into the cooling tray and you use 250 grams, they go all over the place because it doesn't hold them very well. It holds 225 just fine. After you get your beans weighed, set them aside, and you got to preheat the machine. You set the heat all the way up to 12. You set the timer on 3 minutes, and you turn the machine on and let it start to rotate. What's going to happen is when it gets to when the 3 minutes is done, it's going to shut off. When it shuts off, you should quickly grab the tube, dump your beans in, lock it, put it back on. Now set the heat at number 8 and set the timer all the way up to 12. What's going to happen is a safety feature. As the machine roasts, the timer will back down to nothing and then shut off. So you will need to keep turning the timer up while you're doing it, so it doesn't shut off on you. You shouldn't leave the machine unattended anyway. So if it does shut off, you can quickly turn it back on. That's what you do. And then immediately go to your phone and turn the stopwatch on. Like I said, very important you don't forget that step. If you forget to turn it on, you're going to have, you can still get a good roast because you're going to be listening for that first crack. So what you're doing now is you're just waiting. You're simply waiting to hear your first crack. And what happens is as your beans are roasting, they release moisture. And as they release moisture, they get lighter, darker, and that's how you know what stage of the roast you're in. So that's kind of important. So the first crack, you'll hear it sounds like popcorn. You'll get a few pops here and there, and then it'll start popping more rapid. Once it starts popping more rapid, record that time. When you hear your first crack, you turn the machine from 8 down to 6. If you were happy with this roast, you're going to know that the next time you roast, if the first crack is at the same time as the previous roast, you know you're on the right track. Now, let me mention this. If you like a light roast, after the first crack, shut the machine off, drop the beans, put them in the cooler, you're done. And that's going to be somewhere around 12, 13% moisture loss. Now, if you're like me and you like roast a little bit darker, you're going to keep going. So you keep going until you get to the second crack. Now, second crack's going to sound more like bacon. It sizzles, and things start to happen real quickly now. When you get to the second crack, be careful, because if you go all the way to the end of the second crack, that's usually fine for the roast, but you'll need to drop it as soon as you get to the end of the second crack, or you're going to end up with charcoal and you're not going to be able to drink it. If they start to look real oily, drop them immediately, because when they get real oily, that means they're done. And then there again, once you check the moisture loss, you'll get a good idea of if this roast is something you're going to enjoy. If you check your moisture loss and it's 22, 23%, then you goofed. And there's not much you can do. I have noticed that if you do a light roast and it comes out and it's not quite as dark as you want, you are able to put it back in. You're not going to have much to go by. You put it on 6 because you've already been in your first crack. So, like I say, you're not going to hear anything, and you're going to want to get them out of there before the second crack. So just keep an eye on the color and experiment, drop them, and check them again. See where it's at. Keep notes. Keep very meticulous notes on when all this happened. I have a chart that I use that I made myself. It has all the information you would want to put on there for every time you roast, so that you can refer to it. All right, so now we're at the second crack. We're at where we want to drop it. We're happy with that, happy with the color. We shut it off. We drop the roast into the cooling tray. We separate the top part from the bottom part. We turn the cooling tray on, and then you just need to cool in about 3 minutes. It's amazing. This cooling system works so well that it's unbelievable. And what I do is I get a wooden spoon, and I run my wooden spoon over top of the beans. And what that does is it knocks the chaff down in. All right, this roast got away from me a little bit. It's a little darker than what I wanted. We started with 225 grams. We ended up with 178. Clear it, and you put 225 minus 178 equals 47, which is high, divided by 225 equals 0.24. So it's 20% moisture loss. This is okay. I like a real dark roast, so this is fine. If it would have been at 22%, it would have been ruined. It would have been charcoal. So we're right on the edge. So what's going to happen is I'm going to do another roast. I'm probably going to do 2 more roasts. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to drop it quicker. So it's around 16% moisture loss. So that when I add the 16% moisture loss with a 20% moisture loss, I get more 18%, which is what I like. So that's what I mean by trial and error. I'm going to blame it on filming it. But that's what's happened. All right. So just as a final note, I want to reiterate a couple things that I've done, a couple lessons I've learned, mistakes I've made. It's so important to make sure you turn the timer on and shut it off when you're done. Because like I say, well, I can't emphasize it enough that you're going to need that. If you don't have that, then you're at square one. The other thing too is after roasting, when I dump my roast, what I do is after it's roasted, I get it and I spread it out and I look for foreign material. Stones, wood, anything that won't go through the grinder very well. I thought I ruined my grinder one day. I think it was a stone that went through it, but it made an awful noise. So just go through real quick, not a big deal. You can see foreign objects a lot better once it's roasted. You got a gray stone sitting there with a dark brown bean, you're able to pick that up a lot quicker. And the other thing is, when you're done cooling your beans, make sure you shut the fan off. I've already forgotten to shut the fan off, preheated, started my new roast, and the fan was on the whole time, which totally just messed everything up. So very important, shut that fan off. And on your phone, when you go into settings for the display and brightness, set it to, set the auto lock on never. So that way it won't shut off. If you don't do that and you're halfway through a roast, the screen goes black, then you got to hurry up and set it to get back to where you were. So that's kind of important. All right, so that's pretty much it. I really hope you enjoyed this. I hope to help somebody. If somebody got anything out of this that helped you make a more consistent roast, let me know. The other thing is, I'm Italian. So we do a lot of Italian stuff around here. Not that making espresso is Italian, but it kind of is. I bought a flare machine, a very inexpensive way to make espresso. Makes great espresso. I love to show you my morning routine, what I do every morning. I make myself a double latte, and I'd love to run through that and show you. If you're interested, let me know. The other thing is, as you can see in the background here, I'm into coffee also. I have pretty much every coffee maker that's on the market, the AeroPress, the Mocha, the pour over, the French press, and I do a lot of different coffees. If you're interested in the way I do it, I'd love to show you. One last thing, I was talking about my Italian background. I thought that when I passed on, that all the stuff I learned from my mom, all the Italian, the pasta, homemade pastas and the raviolis and the gnocchis and the homemade bread and all that stuff, I thought it was, but my children have really embraced it. My children and grandchildren love to come over here, sit at my table. I love to show you 15 of us in my family, from ages 2 to 75, making homemade raviolis. It's a nice tradition. If you're interested in that, let me know. I'd love to show it to you. Thank you.